The night sky above the alien world was heavy with clouds. Lightning rolled across the black horizon like silver snakes, and thunder shook the mountains. The fortress of the alien warlord stood in the middle of that storm, a tower of iron and fire, filled with guards and weapons, filled with fear. No one dared to enter without permission. No one dared to even fly near, for the warlord was known across the stars as the conqueror of 100 worlds, the butcher of moons, the ruler of the endless. Dark. Inside the fortress, the warlord sat upon a throne made of bones and steel. His eyes burned red like molten fire. His claws tapped against the metal armrests. He waited for news from his captains. He waited for more victories. He waited for more slaves to be brought before him. He was patient but restless, for even in peace his hunger for war never slept. Far below the throne room, deep in the hidden chambers, his cubs slept. 3 young heirs with scales still soft and teeth still sharp. They were watched by guards day and night. They were raised to know nothing but strength and violence. They were taught that one day they would carry the fire of their father and burn worlds as he had done. No one touched them without order. No one spoke to them without fear, for they were the blood of the warlord. They were his pride and his future. But on this night, a shadow moved where no shadow should be. A figure slipped through the gates unseen. A figure moved across the courtyard, silent as wind, quick as water. The guards looked but saw nothing, for this shadow was not like the others. This shadow was human, one fragile body against the might of the fortress, one soft creature among iron beasts. Yet he walked without fear. He walked with purpose. The human had once been a prisoner here. He had known the dungeons. He had known the chains. He had known the cruelty of the warlord. Yet he had escaped, and now he had returned, not for revenge, not for gold, not for power. He had returned for something greater, something dangerous, something that no other being in the galaxy would dare. He had returned for the cubs. The human crept past the armory, past the halls of fire, past the patrols that roared in alien tongues. His heart beat fast, but his steps never slowed. He had planned this night for years. He had studied every corner, every guard, every secret path. He carried no gun, no blade, no shield, only his hands, only his will, only a strange belief that even children of monsters could learn another way. He reached the chamber where the cubs slept. The door was guarded by 2 giants with spears. Their armor glowed with red light. Their eyes scanned the shadows. Yet when the thunder rolled and the lightning struck, the human was already inside, slipping through like smoke, leaving no trace behind. The cubs stirred in their sleep. Their small claws scratched the stone floor. Their eyes opened with confusion. They smelled the scent of something they had never smelled before, the scent of a human. They growled low. Their teeth flashed. They were ready to bite, ready to scream. Yet the human knelt before them, his voice soft, his hands open. He whispered words they had never heard, words gentle like rain, words calm like morning. The cubs did not understand, but they listened. Their growls faded. Their eyes blinked. They tilted their heads. They did not strike. And in that moment the human reached out. He touched them. He lifted them one by one. And though they were heavy and fierce, though their bodies wriggled and hissed, he held them close. He carried them with arms that shook but did not fall. He carried them as if they were not heirs of war but children of his own. Then the alarm screamed. The fortress shook with noise. Lights flashed across the walls. Guards shouted. Weapons roared. The warlord rose from his throne with a scream that split the air. He knew something had been taken. He knew something had been stolen. His roar thundered across the halls. His claws ripped through steel. He called for blood. He called for death. But the human was already gone, racing through secret paths, vanishing into the storm. The cubs pressed against him, confused and afraid, but silent, as if some strange trust had already taken root in their hearts, as if they felt something they had never felt before, something their father had never given them. Something that was not fear, not pain, not cruelty, but warmth. The storm swallowed them as they fled. Lightning lit their path. Thunder covered their steps. The warlord roared again, his voice shaking the heavens, his fury burning the stars. Yet the human did not stop. He carried the cubs into the endless night, into the unknown, into the beginning of something the galaxy would never forget. The storm raged above the skies as the human carried the cubs away from the fortress. The mountains groaned under the weight of thunder, and the rivers swelled with lightning. Yet he kept running, his breath heavy but steady, his arms strong though they shook, his eyes fixed on the hidden path ahead. For he knew he had only moments before the hunters would come, before the warlord would send his armies, before the stars themselves would blaze with fire. The cubs twisted in his arms, their sharp little claws scratched at his chest, their teeth snapped like tiny blades. They hissed and growled, their voices rising in confusion and anger. They had never been touched by hands that were not claws. They had never been held with care. They had never known a voice that spoke soft and steady. They were the children of a beast, raised in darkness, raised in chains of fear. And now they were in the arms of a man they did not understand. The human whispered as he ran, his voice quiet like falling rain, his words simple and soft. He told them stories even as the storm howled. He told them of his own world far beyond the reach of the warlord, a world of oceans and forests, a world of people who built and dreamed, a world where children laughed instead of roared, a world where fire was for warmth, not for war. His words flowed like a river into the cubs' ears, though they did not yet understand the meaning. They felt the tone, they felt the calm, they felt a strange comfort. Behind them the fortress lit the sky with flames. The warlord had unleashed the alarm. Ships rose like hunting birds into the clouds. Soldiers roared as they followed the scent of the human. Their eyes burned with rage. Their weapons blazed with light. The whole night trembled under the weight of pursuit. Yet the human knew the paths of the mountains. He knew the cracks in the stone. He knew the rivers that ran deep under the rocks. He had lived in chains here. He had studied every secret, every shadow, and now he used that knowledge to vanish into the storm. He reached a cave hidden by vines, a hole in the earth that led to tunnels long forgotten. And there he entered, clutching the cubs close as the hunters passed above, their roars echoing like thunder, their searchlights tearing the clouds. But they did not see him. They did not sense him, for he had already gone deeper, deeper into the darkness, where only silence lived. In the cave he rested for a moment, his breath heavy, his arms sore. The cubs wriggled and growled, their eyes glowing in the dark, their teeth snapping. Yet they did not cry out. They only stared at him with confusion, their little hearts beating fast, their sharp tails twitching in the dust. They had never known stillness. They had never known gentleness. And here in the arms of a human, they felt something they could not name. The man spoke again, his voice a whisper against the stone. He told them why he had come, not for glory, not for vengeance, but because he believed. He believed that even the children of monsters could be more. He believed that they could learn not just how to fight, but how to live. He believed that they could carry not only the fire of their father, but also the light of something new. He believed that in their hearts there was more than rage, more than cruelty, more than chains. He believed there was choice. The cubs tilted their heads, their eyes narrowed, their small claws paused. They did not understand all the words, but they understood the feeling. They sensed the warmth in his voice. They sensed the strange calm in his touch. They sensed that he did not fear them, that he did not hate them, that he did not see them as weapons or trophies, but as children. As dawn began to rise beyond the cave, the humans set out once more, carrying them through forests and valleys, across rivers and fields, until he reached a place hidden from the eyes of the warlord, a planet small and quiet, forgotten by most, a place where life grew in silence, where the stars shone without fear, where no conqueror cared to look. It was here that he had built his refuge, a village of wood and stone, a place of peace carved out of exile. He brought the cubs into a small house, simple and warm, with fire for light and water for drink. He laid them down upon soft cloth instead of stone. He fed them food not of blood but of grain and fruit. They spat and snarled at first, their sharp little teeth refusing, their tongues confused. But slowly hunger made them taste. Slowly their jaws chewed. Slowly their eyes widened at flavors unknown, sweet instead of bitter, warm instead of raw, gentle instead of cruel. The human watched and smiled, though his heart ached with fear, for he knew the warlord would never stop. He knew the galaxy would tremble under the search. He knew that armies would burn and planets would fall until the cubs were found. Yet still he believed. He believed that if he could teach them, if he could show them another path, then one day they would stand not as heirs of war, but as voices of change. One day they would rise not with claws of blood but with hands of peace. One day they would prove that even in the darkest blood there could be light. Days turned to weeks. The cubs grew restless. They fought. They scratched. They roared. Yet the human never struck back. He only guided. He only showed. He only taught. When they attacked, he shielded them with patience. When they howled, he answered with stories. When they broke, he rebuilt. He taught them how to share food, how to sit together, how to listen, how to play. He showed them games from his childhood, games of running, games of laughter, games where no one lost. The cubs resisted, but then they began to mimic. Then they began to laugh. Then they began to change. One night, as stars filled the sky, one of the cubs crawled close to him, its claws curled in fear, its eyes wide with something it had never felt. It pressed against his side and whispered in its rough voice. The word was broken but clear. The word was simple. It said, "Teacher," and the human's heart trembled, for in that single word he knew his plan was not in vain. He knew that even in the children of war, seeds of hope could grow. And so the human stayed hidden with the cubs, the warlord's rage spreading across galaxies, fleets burning, soldiers searching, the galaxy whispering of the man who had stolen the heirs of the beast. Some called him mad, some called him brave, some called him doomed. But the truth was something far greater. The truth was that he had lit a fire not of war but of change, a fire that would not be seen for years, but would one day burn brighter than all the wars of the past, for the human had not stolen cubs. He had stolen the future itself. The warlord's roar split the sky as his armies poured out of the fortress. His voice carried across the mountains and rivers, across the valleys and storms, and the galaxy trembled under his fury. For never before had anyone dared to steal from him. Never before had anyone dared to touch the blood of his house. Never before had a fragile human challenged his name. Yet now his cubs were gone, and his honor burned like fire, and he would not rest until the thief was found and torn apart. Ships rose from the black hangars, vast beasts of iron with wings of flame. They tore through the clouds and lit the sky with engines of thunder. Soldiers in armor of bone and steel roared their chants. Their weapons gleamed with light, and the stars themselves seemed to hide as the fleet spread across the void, world after world falling under the shadow of their search. No corner of space safe from the reach of the warlord's wrath. The human knew this. He knew that silence would not last. He knew that the warlord would scour the galaxy. He knew that entire planets might burn to find him. Yet he did not tremble. He worked. He taught. He cared. He built a small refuge stronger. He watched the cubs as they stumbled and learned, as they fought and softened, as they began to laugh. And though fear gnawed at his heart, he never let it show, for he understood that to the cubs he was not only a guardian, he was a world they had never known. But beyond his quiet valley the hunt grew fiercer. Scouts questioned merchants in far ports. Patrols stormed villages and demanded answers. Whispers spread in dark corners of space. Whispers that a human had defied the warlord. Whispers that the heirs of the beast were no longer his. Whispers that perhaps even the strongest empire could bleed. Some species whispered with fear, others with secret joy, for many had suffered under the warlord's chains. Many had lost homes and kin to his conquests, and the thought of his weakness was a dangerous seed, one that might grow. The warlord heard these whispers and crushed them. He burned markets where they were spoken. He shattered moons where they spread. Yet the more he raged, the more the galaxy noticed. His fury was not only a hunt for children. It was a sign, a crack in the armor of terror he had built. And those who lived in shadows began to wonder, if a single human could wound him, what might many do? Meanwhile the cubs continued to change. At first they still hissed when he touched them. At first they still tried to bite when he fed them. But time passed like a river, slow and unstoppable. And the human never gave up. He showed them fire not as a weapon but as warmth. He showed them water not as a cage but as life. He showed them stories not of conquest but of courage. He sang songs of stars and oceans. He drew pictures in the dirt of beasts that had become friends, wolves that had once hunted men but became companions, lions that had once killed but were tamed. And the cubs listened with wide eyes, their hearts uncertain, their claws still sharp but their voices softening. One cub in particular began to follow him everywhere, its small feet padding close, Its eyes filled with strange curiosity. When he worked in the fields, the cub watched. When he cooked food, the cub sniffed. When he sat by the fire, the cub curled beside him. The others still resisted, still snapped and growled. But even they began to look different. Their eyes less hard, their growls less deep. For something in the human's presence was changing them, something no warlord could ever understand. Yet danger grew near, for the warlord scouts finally found a trail. They discovered traders who spoke of a human buying food far from the fortress. They found witnesses who saw him carrying strange cargo. They followed the path across systems, and soon their ships burned through the skies, near the hidden planet. The human saw the lights in the heavens and knew the time of peace was ending. He gathered the cubs. He held them close. He whispered to them with calm even as fear tore through his chest. He told them not to fear. He told them to remember what they had learned. He told them that no matter what came, they were not just children of a warlord. They were something more. The cubs trembled, their eyes wide, their tails twitching. They did not fully understand, but they felt the weight of his words. They felt the strength in his voice. They felt the strange bond that had grown between them, a bond stronger than chains, stronger than blood, stronger even than fear itself. The hunters descended, soldiers with armor black as night and weapons sharp as flame. They stormed the village. They tore down doors. They roared their chants. But when they found the house, it was empty. The human had already taken the cubs into the forest, moving through the trees like a shadow, carrying them in silence, hiding them in roots and caves, shielding them with his body. For he had promised to protect them, and promises were chains stronger than iron. The soldiers searched for days. They burned fields. They broke walls. Yet they found nothing. The human was always one step ahead, always slipping away. And the cubs watched him with new eyes. They saw his strength not in claws, but in patience, not in rage, but in calm. They saw how he never gave up, how he never surrendered, how he fought not with blood, but with belief. And slowly their growls turned into silence, their silence turned into trust, their trust into something deeper, something dangerous, something their father would never allow. And so the hunt continued. The warlord's rage spread like fire. His army swept across the stars. The galaxy watched as the most feared being searched and failed. His enemies whispered with hope. His allies trembled with doubt. His empire shook though it still stood. And in the heart of this storm a single human held 3 cubs and whispered to them under the stars, whispering that they could choose who they wished to be, whispering that they could make a future different from their father, whispering that the galaxy was wide and waiting, whispering that they were not alone. The warlord vowed he would tear the galaxy apart until his cubs were returned, yet the human vowed that he would never surrender them, never give them back to chains, never let them forget what they had begun to learn. For the hunt was not only for the cubs, it was for the soul of the galaxy itself. And though the warlord commanded fleets and armies, the human commanded something greater, something invisible, something that grew in silence, the power of belief, the power of choice, the power of a heart unbroken. And as the stars burned above, as ships screamed across the void, as soldiers roared and planets trembled, the hunt began not only for the children but for the future. And though the human was small and frail, though he was hunted and hated, though he was alone against empires, he carried in his arms the one thing the warlord could never crush. He carried hope, and hope would not die. The hidden valley lay in silence as the human led the cubs back to his refuge. The hunt outside raged on with fire and iron, but here in the folds of green hills and flowing rivers there was calm, a fragile calm held by his will alone. The cubs sat near the fire and watched him with eyes bright and curious. They no longer snapped with rage at every touch, no longer growled at every word. They had begun to sense that here the laws of their father did not exist. Here there was no chain of fear, no whip of command. Here there was something they had never known. The human began his lessons each dawn as the sun rose, his voice steady, his hands patient. He showed them how to take water from the stream and drink without waste, how to gather food not with blood but with care, how to plant seeds in the soil and wait for life to grow. At first they laughed with sharp voices. They mocked the soft work of hands digging in earth. They called it weakness. They called it foolish. Yet when the first shoots broke the ground days later, when green leaves rose where there had been only dirt, Their eyes widened with wonder, and their claws touched the leaves gently, for they had never seen power that came without war. At night the human told stories. He sat with them around the fire and spoke of his world. He told of oceans that stretched without end, where waves roared like beasts yet gave life instead of death. He told of forests older than empires, filled with creatures that lived in harmony instead of conquest. He told of people who fought, yes, but also built, who dreamed, who reached for stars not to conquer, but to learn. His words painted pictures in their minds, pictures they had never imagined, and, though they did not understand every word, they felt the shape of his meaning. They felt the strange pull of his voice. They felt the warmth of a world they had never seen. The cubs began to change slowly like the tide. Their growls turned softer, their teeth still sharp, but less quick to bite. They began to ask questions, their voices curious. They asked why he planted seeds when he could simply hunt. They asked why he built shelters when he could live in caves. They asked why he told stories instead of giving commands. The human answered with patience. He explained that strength was not only in claws, but in care. That power was not only in fire, but in kindness. That true rule was not to conquer, but to guide. The cubs listened, though their eyes often narrowed, for the teachings were strange to their blood. Yet the words settled inside them, like sparks waiting for flame. One day he showed them play. He carved small figures from wood, shaped them into animals and men, and taught the cubs how to move them in games. At first they thought it foolish. They threw the figures and snarled. But when he laughed gently and showed them again, when he moved the figures like stories of battle, but without pain, when he turned the game into laughter, they began to laugh too, their rough voices breaking into strange joy, their sharp teeth showing in smiles instead of snarls. They had never known laughter before, and the sound filled the valley like new light. Yet even as the cubs learned, the shadow of the warlord grew heavier. His army still scoured the stars. His wrath still shook the galaxy. Worlds burned for rumors. Villages fell for whispers. Fleets patrolled every corner of space. And still the cubs remained hidden. The human's refuge still unseen. The silence still unbroken. But he knew the day would come when that silence would end. He knew the warlord's eyes would one day turn toward this valley. And he prepared the cubs, not with weapons, but with words, not with commands, but with choices. For he believed that when that day came they must be ready to decide for themselves. One evening as the fire burned low, the youngest cub sat close to him and asked why he risked so much, why he had taken them from their father, why he cared for them when they were not his. The human looked into the glowing eyes of the cub and spoke softly. He said because he had seen what they could become. He said because no child should be born only to kill. He said because he believed that in their hearts they were more than weapons, more than heirs of war, more than tools of fear, he said, because they were children, and children should be free to choose their path. The cub did not answer at once. Its small claws flexed in the dirt. Its tail twitched. Its sharp teeth showed. But then it leaned against his side, resting its head on his arm, a gesture small yet greater than any roar. For in that moment trust was born, fragile and trembling but alive, a trust that could not be commanded, a trust that could not be forced, a trust that only choice could create. The days passed into weeks. The cubs learned to share food instead of fight for it, to listen instead of shout, to wait instead of strike. They still stumbled often. They still snarled when angry. They still dreamed of power. But in each of them the seeds had been planted, seeds of something different, seeds of humanity. And though they did not yet understand, though they did not yet name it, they felt the difference grow inside them like a secret flame. The human knew the risk. He knew that if the warlord found them, the cubs would be torn from him. He knew that if the galaxy discovered them, enemies would come. Yet still he taught. Still he believed. For he had seen the first signs of change. And those signs gave him strength. Those signs told him that his plan was not in vain, that his sacrifice was not without purpose, that even in the children of monsters there could be hope. And so, in the quiet valley hidden from the roar of empires, the lessons of humanity began to shape the heirs of war, shaping them not with chains but with love, not with fear but with trust, not with conquest but with choice. And though the warlord's wrath shook the stars above, though his army still scoured the galaxy, in this small place a different power was growing, a power not of iron or fire but of laughter, of stories, of kindness, of change, a power that could not yet be seen but one day would shake the galaxy more than all the Warlord's fleets, for here in silence and in patience the future was being rewritten. The Warlord stood upon the balcony of his fortress as the suns rose over the mountains. His eyes burned with fire, and his claws cut grooves into the iron railing. His voice had shaken the galaxy for weeks. His fleets had burned across the stars. Yet his cubs remained lost. His honor remained broken. His fury grew deeper than oceans, and all who served him trembled in his shadow, for they knew his wrath was not only against the thief, but against all who lived, against all who whispered, against all who dared to believe that his power could be challenged. He summoned his generals into the Hall of Bones, the vast chamber echoing with the sound of their armor. They knelt before him in silence, their heads bowed, their voices still, waiting for his command. His roar thundered through the chamber. He accused them of failure. He accused them of weakness. He accused them of shame. He swore that until the cubs were returned he would tear apart every world that dared hide them. He would drown every star in fire. He would show the galaxy that his name was still terror, and that no human thief could ever undo it. Across the stars his order spread. Fleets moved faster. Armies marched harder. Villages burned brighter. Moons shattered beneath bombardments. Markets silenced by fire. His wrath became a storm without end, and those who once feared him now feared even more. Yet whispers still spread in secret corners. Whispers of the human who had taken the cubs. Whispers of the Warlord who searched but did not find. Whispers that perhaps his power was not endless. Whispers that perhaps he could bleed. The Warlord heard these whispers, and his claws tore through steel. His roar shook his fortress. His eyes burned with hatred. He swore to make an example. He swore to destroy not only the human but all who thought him weak. He swore to bring the cubs back and forge them into weapons sharper than ever. He swore that their softness would be burned away, that their hearts would be chained, that their humanity would be crushed, and that they would one day kill the very man who had stolen them. Meanwhile, in the valley the human felt the weight of the Warlord's fury even from afar. The skies above carried the faint glow of distant burning worlds. The stars seemed dim with sorrow. The cubs heard the echoes of destruction, and their eyes grew dark. They asked the human why their father burned so many for them. They asked if they were worth the lives lost. They asked if they were the cause of suffering. The human listened, and his heart ached. Yet he told them the truth. He told them that their father's wrath was not their fault. He told them that cruelty was a choice. He told them that they could choose differently. The cubs struggled with his words. They felt torn between the blood of their father and the voice of their teacher. They dreamed of fire and chains. They woke with cries of rage. Yet in the daylight, they remembered the lessons. They remembered the games. They remembered the stories. They remembered the laughter. They remembered that the human had never struck them, never chained them, never forced them, and their hearts warred within them, torn between two paths. The Warlord sent spies into the hidden corners of the galaxy. He promised riches and power to any who found the cubs. He threatened death to any who hid them. And soon mercenaries joined the hunt. Hunters from broken worlds seeking reward. Wanderers who desired glory. And yet none returned, for the human knew how to vanish. He knew the caves. He knew the rivers. He knew the stars. He kept the cubs safe with patience. He kept them hidden with silence. And though his strength waned, he did not give in. Still the Warlord's wrath reached closer. One night the sky above the valley lit with the glow of passing ships. The cubs watched with fear. The human gathered them close. He whispered to them again. He told them not to forget. He told them that even if soldiers came, they must remember who they were becoming. He told them that they were more than heirs of war, that they were children who could choose, that they could defy the chains of blood. The cubs listened, their small claws trembling, their eyes filled with tears they did not understand, for they had never known tears before. They asked him why he cared so deeply when he knew it might kill him. They asked him why he gave his life to protect them. He answered with quiet voice. He said because once he had been a child too. Once he had been powerless. Once he had been broken by chains. And he swore that no child should feel that again, not even the children of his enemy. The Warlord learned of this small world through whispers carried by fearful traitors. He prepared his fleets. He sharpened his rage. He declared that when he found the planet, He would not only take the cubs, but also burn the land to ash. He declared that no trace of the humans' defiance would remain. He declared that the galaxy would remember not his weakness, but his victory. He declared that he would show the stars once more that the Warlord was endless. And so the storm grew heavier. The hunt grew closer. The air in the valley filled with tension. The cubs could feel the weight of destiny pressing on their small shoulders. They looked at the human with questions unspoken. They wondered if they were strong enough. They wondered if they would betray him when their father arrived. They wondered if they truly could choose. Yet still they stayed beside him. Still they listened. Still they learned. The human knew the time was near. He prepared not with weapons, but with words. He prepared not with armor, but with hope. He taught the cubs even in the final days. He told them that strength was not in fire, but in love. He told them that courage was not in killing, but in protecting. He told them that the greatest victory was not in conquest, but in kindness. And though their father's wrath roared across the stars, the cubs began to feel another fire within, a fire not of rage, but of choice. The Warlord's wrath would soon fall upon the valley, his fleets already gathered, his armies ready, his eyes burning with fury. The galaxy held its breath as the storm prepared to break, and in the small refuge hidden among rivers and trees a human sat with 3 cubs, holding them close, whispering lessons of humanity, preparing them for the moment when the sky itself would burn, the moment when they would have to stand and decide who they truly were. The night was heavy with silence as the human stood in the valley with the 3 cubs. The air carried the smell of smoke from distant worlds already burned. The stars above flickered like frightened eyes, and deep within the horizon the glow of engines shone like fireflies of death. The Warlord was coming. His fleets were countless, his rage without end, and the galaxy trembled as the storm of his arrival grew closer and closer. The cubs pressed against the human, their small bodies shivering, their eyes wide with confusion. They felt a bond with their teacher, yet they also felt the pull of their blood. The shadow of their father loomed over them even from far away. They remembered his roar. They remembered the chains of fear. They remembered the hunger for power that had been placed in their hearts since birth. Yet they also remembered the laughter by the fire, the stories of oceans, the games in the fields, the gentle hand that had never struck them. And inside them 2 voices fought, one of rage and one of hope. The human knelt before them, his face calm though his heart shook like the mountains. He placed his hands upon their shoulders, his voice low and steady. He told them the truth. He told them that their father would come soon. He told them that soldiers would arrive with weapons and chains. He told them that he could not fight them with strength, that he could not defeat fleets with one body, that he could not shield them from fire forever. But he also told them that he had never intended to fight with iron. He had intended to fight with choice, for the true weapon was not claws or guns. The true weapon was the power to choose who they would be. The cubs listened, their eyes shining in the glow of the fire, their tails twitching with fear. They asked him what he wanted from him. They asked him why he risked everything, why he cared when they were not his children, why he gave his life to protect them. The human answered with a quiet strength. He said because he believed they could be more. He said because every child deserved the chance to decide their own path. He said because he saw not monsters, but children in need of freedom. He said because love was stronger than fear. The ground shook as ships descended through the clouds. Their engines roared like thunder. Their lights burned the valley. Soldiers poured from their holds in black armor. Weapons gleamed like fire. The Warlord himself stepped down, his massive form cloaked in shadows, his eyes blazing with fury. His roar tore through the air. He called out for his cubs, his voice both command and promise. He swore they would return to him. He swore their humanity would be crushed. He swore they would be reforged into heirs of war. The cubs trembled, their hearts torn. They looked to the human. They looked to their father. The Warlord stretched out his claws. His voice softened though rage burned beneath. He told them to come back. He told them that the human had poisoned them. He told them that only in his arms would they be strong. He told them that blood was destiny, and that no child could defy it. His words wrapped around them like chains of iron. His presence pulled at them like gravity. Yet the human did not resist. He did not fight. He simply stood tall and spoke with calm. He told the cubs that they were free. He told them that this was the moment, that no one could choose for them, not him, not their father, only themselves. The cubs cried out with voices that shook. Their eyes darted between father and teacher. Their claws dug into the soil. Their teeth bared with fear. They felt the war within them roar, one side screaming for conquest, the other whispering for peace. One side pulling them toward the throne of their father, the other holding them close to the warmth of the fire. And in that clash of worlds they understood at last. They understood that choice was not easy. That choice was pain, but that choice was freedom. The warlord stepped forward, his claws ready, his soldiers raising weapons. The cubs roared back in defiance, their small voices sharp but strong. They shouted that they would not return. They shouted that they had learned another way. They shouted that the human was not poison but teacher, not weakness but strength, not chains but freedom. The valley rang with their cries, cries that cut deeper into the warlord than any blade, for in that moment his heirs had refused him. The warlord froze. His rage burned like fire, yet behind it a crack opened. He saw the eyes of his cubs, and he saw not weakness but will. He saw not betrayal but freedom. He saw not chains but choice. And for the first time in centuries, he felt something unfamiliar. He felt doubt. He roared again louder than thunder. The ground split. The sky shook. But his cubs did not move. They stood beside the human, their small bodies trembling but unbroken, their voices strong with belief, their choice made. The soldiers waited for his command, their weapons ready, their eyes wide. But the warlord did not give the order. He stared at the human with eyes of fire. The human stared back with eyes calm as water, and in that silence more powerful than war, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The warlord growled low. He swore that the choice they had made would change nothing. He swore that they would regret it. He swore that the galaxy would pay. Yet his voice shook with something he could not hide. His voice shook with fear. The human spoke once more, his words steady as stone. He told the warlord that power built on chains would always fall. He told him that even the strongest empire could be undone by a single choice. He told him that no army could crush freedom forever. He told him that the cubs had chosen, and that their path now belonged to them. The warlord roared again, but the sound no longer carried the same weight. It was not the roar of certainty, but of anger, not of endless strength, but of wounded pride. The warlord turned at last. His soldiers followed, their steps heavy, their eyes uncertain. The fleets rose into the sky. Their engines burned with fury, yet they carried with them the shadow of failure. The crack in the empire had been made. The cubs stood trembling but alive. The human held them close, whispering that they had done what no one had dared, whispering that they had chosen not with chains, but with hearts, whispering that they had won. And in that valley under the stars the future was forged, not with weapons but with voices, not with war but with choice. The cubs had spoken, and the warlord had listened though he hated it. The human had believed, and his belief had been proven true. And though the galaxy still burned, though the empire still stood, a new story had begun, a story of freedom, a story of hope, a story that even the children of war could choose peace, and that story would echo through the stars forever. The valley was quiet after the warlord had gone. The smoke of his fleets faded into the skies. The earth trembled no more, and the stars above seemed to breathe again. The humans sat by the fire, with the cubs close to him, their small bodies pressed against his side, their eyes still wide from what they had faced. Yet their voices no longer trembled, for they had made their choice. They had stood against their father. They had claimed their freedom, and though fear still lingered in their hearts, hope now burned brighter than ever. The cubs asked their teacher what would happen now. They asked if the warlord would return. They asked if the galaxy would believe in them. The human listened with calm eyes. He told them the truth. He told them that their father would never stop watching, that the empire would never forget, that enemies would always seek to break them. Yet he also told them that the hardest part was already done. He told them that they had chosen. He told them that no matter what came next, they had shown that blood was not destiny, that chains could be broken, that even children of war could walk another path. The days in the valley passed slowly. The cubs learned more each morning. They worked in the fields. They carried water. They shared food. They laughed with each other instead of fighting. And though their claws were still sharp, they no longer raised them against one another. They raised them to build, to carve, to shape, to create. The human watched with quiet pride, for he saw not monsters but children growing. He saw not heirs of war, but beings of choice. He saw not the shadow of the Warlord, but the light of something new. Across the galaxy whispers spread like wind, whispers that the Warlord had been defied not by armies, but by his own blood, whispers that the heirs had chosen a human over their father, whispers that the Warlord had left the field not with victory, but with silence. The Empire trembled with these whispers, his soldiers questioned, his enemies rejoiced in secret, his allies doubted, for the terror that had ruled them was cracked, not shattered but cracked, and in that crack light seeped through. The cubs began to ask questions the human had waited for. They asked why people fought wars. They asked why some chose cruelty. They asked why peace was so hard. The human answered with patience. He told them that fear often led to hate. He told them that power often led to greed. He told them that war was easy, but peace was hard. Yet he also told them that the hardest path was often the one worth walking. He told them that peace was built by those willing to sacrifice, by those willing to stand against fire, by those willing to believe even when the world laughed at them. One night the cubs sat by the fire and sang with the human. Their rough voices joined his gentle one, and the valley echoed with music it had never known. Their psalm was not of conquest, not of chains, not of thrones. It was of rivers and stars, of forests and hope, of freedom and love. And though their words were broken, though their tones were strange, the meaning was clear. They were no longer the children of war. They were the children of choice. Yet beyond the valley the Warlord brooded. His eyes burned with shame. His throne felt heavier. His empire shook. He thought of his cubs and their refusal. He thought of the human who had stolen them. He thought of the word teacher. And though he roared and swore that he would crush them one day, deep inside the doubt remained. Deep inside the silence echoed. Deep inside he wondered if perhaps even he could not stop what had begun. The cubs grew stronger with time, not only in body, but in spirit. They learned to build shelters. They learned to grow food. They learned to share instead of hoard. They learned to protect instead of destroy. The human gave them tasks that required patience, tasks that required kindness. And though they stumbled often, though they growled when frustrated, they always rose again. They always tried again. And slowly their nature bent toward something new, toward something their father could not command. The galaxy watched from afar. Distant species whispered in shadows. Some feared the rise of the cubs. Some hoped for their future. Some plotted to use them. But none could deny the truth. The heirs of the Warlord were no longer his. They had chosen humanity. They had chosen freedom. And that choice was a spark that might one day ignite into fire. The human knew his journey was not finished. He knew danger still lurked. He knew the Warlord might strike again. He knew the galaxy might turn against them. Yet he also knew that the cubs had already taken the first step, the most important step, the step that turned chains into wings. He knew that legends were not born in thrones, but in choices. He knew that even if he fell one day, the cubs would carry forward the seed of humanity he had planted, and that seed would grow. One evening the eldest cub looked at him and asked if they would ever return to their father. The human looked into its glowing eyes and said, "Only if you choose." And the cub lowered its gaze and said, "Then never, for we have chosen already." The human placed his hand on the cub's head and whispered that the path ahead would not be easy, that they would be hated by some, hunted by others, doubted by many, but that if they held to their choice, if they lived by it, if they believed in it, then one day the galaxy would see. And so the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months. The cubs no longer only followed. They began to lead. They began to speak with their own voices. They began to share the lessons they had learned with each other. They began to shape their own stories. And though the human guided them, he stepped back when needed, for he knew that the time would come when they must walk without him, when they must teach others as he had taught them, when they must carry the flame into a galaxy still drowning in shadow. The Warlord's wrath remained, his fleet still patrolled, his army still roared, but the legend of the human who had stolen the cubs spread wider and wider, told in markets, told in taverns, told in whispers across the stars, a story of defiance, a story of hope, a story that no empire could silence, and slowly the legend grew larger than fear itself. In the valley under the stars the humans sat with the cubs. Their laughter filled the air. Their eyes shone with freedom, and he knew that even if the Warlord returned with all the power of the galaxy, even if armies came and fire rained, he had already won, for he had given them the one gift that no chain could take. He had given them choice, and from that choice a new legend had begun, a legend that would spread from world to world, from star to star, until the galaxy itself remembered that even in the darkest blood there could be light, and that even in the hands of a single human, hope could be stolen from the jaws of war and carried into the future.